So it's been 1 year since former President Yoon Suk Yeol attempted to impose martial law on December 3rd, plunging the country into political turmoil. For more on how the country has worked to navigate the crisis over the past year, we're joined today by Professor Lee Hee-eun, Dean and Professor of Law at Handong International Law School. Professor Lee, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
So President Lee Jae Myung addressed the public earlier in the morning, and he marked the first anniversary of martial law declaration. What are your thoughts on his speech?
Well, I thought that it was a speech that basically was praising, obviously, the Korean people for their reaction to this effort of martial law. Obviously, calling it the revolution of light, and then basically saying to the public and just to the international community as a whole, this was a message not just to Korea but everyone around the world, to say that the Korean people were resilient. They deserve a Nobel Prize, and if they indeed get a Nobel Prize, this will send a message about democracy and turning back authoritarian regimes. So, his characterization of the events of that day a year ago was not that this is just a martial law declaration, but basically it was a coup d'etat. And so his characterization that this was a coup is an interesting characterization, but he's sort of referencing this in light of sort of democratic principles and saying, really, it's the people that got together, defended the National Assembly, allowed it to do its work to end the martial law declaration. And basically, in commemoration of this, he's established a day today to be the People's Sovereignty Day, basically, indicating that this was something which the people were involved in and were a direct sort of participant in rejecting this martial law declaration. And then, I think another thing that to mention here too is he mentioned that the ongoing investigations against the people who were involved in this coup, as he calls it, and that they will be subject to very strict punishment. And the indication here and his signal is that this will be ongoing, it will be thorough, it will be comprehensive, and that those people who were involved will be brought to justice. And I think this is sort of a signal to everyone who's involved and to the public that these special prosecutor investigations, as you referenced it earlier in the reporting about Representative Chu, will continue on to the bitter end. And so this will be, I think, a defining moment, I think, with respect to Korea's politics, especially when it comes to the investigations that relate to this event. And then lastly, and I think one of the, interesting, also important aspects of his speech was that, he was saying something about unification, that his job is to unify the people. And this was a defining moment in Korea's history, modern history, to unite the people under democracy and constitutional order. So I think in the end, what you saw, this was a praise of the Korean people, but also a signal that, justice from his perspective will be done.
Right. It was interesting how he specifically described the incident as a coup. And the president's also set to speak at a foreign media conference shortly. What do you think he will try to convey to the global press?
Right. I think he's going to really talk about and sort of bring up, Korea's resilient democracy. This is the first time, he says, in the 21st century where, a coup was attempted and peacefully rejected by the Korean people. And so I think he's going to sort of play that up to the foreign press. He's also going to talk about, I think, as well, the role of the constitutional order, that the National Assembly, of course, that Korea didn't devolve into chaos. When this happened, there was an orderly process, even though it was chaotic for a little bit, that the National Assembly was able to meet and then declare an end to the martial law. And then another, I think, aspect of this will be to say that, Korea is stable. And we have a stable democracy, and foreign policy of Korea, I think, is going to touch on this stability that Korea can be counted on and is a shining example to the rest of the world about what a real democracy looks like, especially when there's places around the world where democracies are faltering and in crisis. So I think that will be one of his messages, as well as, I think, lastly, rejecting authoritarian rule. And so the way he's characterizing this again is that, President Yoon was acting like a dictator. And so, like in the past, Korea's had those experiences, but that Korea has sort of responded and sort of met the challenge to deal with these kinds of problems domestically. So I think for the foreign press, he's going to, I think, put out this view that K-democracy is something which, should be a model for other countries around the world.
Right, and all this comes as it's been a year since martial law was imposed. Could you just give us your brief overall assessment of the Korean government's efforts so far to restore and sort of strengthen democracy?
Right. I think, obviously we saw the role of the National Assembly and the Constitutional Court, right, with respect to ending martial law, but then, impeaching the president. And that's something which I think can be viewed as, a strong institutional response. But, there's this question of accountability. And, because, we have a special prosecutor now who's investigating these allegations and then, maybe potentially criminal action and criminal convictions, this is going to lead to obviously some amount of polarization. People are really, really have strong feelings about how these investigations are being held, because the question is there a balance between getting justice and then bringing the people together? Because I think you're going to see further polarization within the political process of both parties, digging their heels with respect to these investigations. So it remains to be seen how this goes forward. But I think what you're going to see is a strong institutional response, but the accountability factor will be, I think, something to watch very carefully.
Right, we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Lee, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.